Hey, good morning. We're here with David from Auctus Metal Portfolios. How you doing, David?
Very well. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for joining us. Looking forward to learning more about what it is that you get up to. So, if you could start us off and just give us a bit of an introduction as to who you are, what you do, and how long you've been doing it for, please.
Yeah, sure. In my early days as a young man, I started off in coding and then moved and joined the investment banks in the mid-80s, working for some of the largest private investment banks in the world, including the likes of Bank of America and HSBC, etc., as a trader, trading across multiple asset classes, foreign exchange, various different derivative markets. I left the banks in 2007 because I became very focused on the larger macro picture that was developing. Started up a small fund and invested my own funds across multiple asset classes during the GFC. Moved somewhat into semi-retirement from 2011, 2012, and then became much more focused upon the fact that the macro was moving towards a much larger picture, in respect of a global debt crisis and a monetary debasement. So looking across multiple asset classes, I realized that I wanted to be very much involved in the commodity super cycle that I saw developing moving forward, really leading to the year 2030. I know that sounds a little bit long-winded, but that's how these cycles tend to move. Being led front and center from a wealth preservation aspect was into precious metals. So I returned back to Singapore and started building these companies from 2014 onwards. And so hence I've been in this industry for quite a long time as far as finance and trading and looking after clients' funds and also across the precious metal field.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. So obviously you're based out in Singapore. So we like to ask everyone about the impact of COVID. So it would be an interesting insight to understand how that impacted you guys over there comparative to normally asking Yorkshire-based businesses about that impact. What was the biggest impact for you guys over there?
Of course, Asia took the COVID lockdowns very seriously indeed, and I would suggest a lot more seriously than the West. The West are a little bit freer. So we had to get used to quite extreme lockdowns. Staff were locked into their homes. We've got quite a number of staff, and hence that breakup of the unity of the company, communicating with each one and trying to get the company going in one singular direction had its constraints, let's call it. But also on the positive side, it made us concentrate more because our client base is very much international. We have a great many UK clients, and it pushed us towards increasing the amount of macroeconomic research and research generally around the industry that we're in, because clients become very confused about what the macro picture is dictating, and especially what the benefits are of precious metals, etc. So we ended up employing more people. I obviously lead the research myself, but I employed more skilled in particular areas of the whole spectrum of the precious metal feed, including the mining, production, ore grade degradation, cost of production, the logistic movements of metals, who's buying, who's demanding the metals, the geographical nature of that. And it gives us a much clearer oversight of where we're going and why we're going and what are the timeframes involved. So we threw ourselves heavily into that and supported the client base because obviously we deal in physical, we don't deal in derivatives or paper. So there was obviously logistical problems globally with the shipment of metals from around the world. And that was obviously an added issue. So generally speaking, I think we were all negatively affected by the lockdowns, but it pushed us into a greater reach to the client base, and also the fragility of third-party risk and the fragility of the system itself was made evident during COVID, which tends to push clients towards what we do. And we obviously had a very positive reaction in precious metals during that period. Again, the market reacting positive towards asset classes that are diversification purposes.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to say, if there was any sort of actions that you were forced to take that potentially improved the business, you've mentioned, see that research element and reviewing the business in a bit more detail during that period. Was there anything else in terms of ways of working, perhaps, or changes that were forced upon you, but actually you've stuck with?
It gives you much more of a singular focus of what you're trying to do and how your business, or the gap in the market that you're trying to fill and why.
Yeah.
And you become a much more focused, especially in a situation of that nature that lasted for us really 18 months.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you a much more concentrated, singular focus of what you're trying to do and why.
Sure, I can imagine.
I think that's it.
Thank you for sharing that. So, looking ahead then to the future, you mentioned 2030 as a sort of a year date in mind as to where you are headed. What does it look like for you as far as you can see it from this point onwards as a business, and what you see as the main challenges are going ahead?
So obviously, owning and building a business from scratch and building it to the level that we've got it today, it takes a great deal of focus on, one, balancing the cash flow analysis versus systems and system builds and investment across the whole aspect of the business. Especially in lockdowns, that becomes a singular type focus. Movement forward. So what I want to do is get ahead of what we believe is going to happen from a macro perspective, from a market perspective, that things will continue to deteriorate quite rapidly across the world from an economic perspective. This will move much more intently towards the commodity cycle, purely because we have such a dramatic deterioration within the whole commodity sector itself.
Mm-hmm.
Supply demand numbers. A lot of people or a lot of politicians tend to put this down to bottlenecks within the supply chain. I would suggest, yes, that did have an effect, but the majority of the supply side has been affected due to lack of investment within the capital investment within the whole commodity sector itself, which has driven us to an extreme event where we have extreme supply demand deficits across the world. We're seeing that with energy, obviously, with the deterioration of our relationship with Russia, but it's grains, it's metals, it's the whole spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Further investment analysis from several research agencies are saying that up to 90% of the whole commodity spectrum is either in supply demand deficit to extreme supply demand tightness. Precious metals indeed are being affected quite dramatically from the supply demand picture, which leads us ultimately into the year 2032. 2032 is just basically a cyclical analysis objective.
Mm-hmm.
But we're going to see quite dramatic events over the next couple of years.
Thank you for that. It's good insight there, sharing that. So moving on to yourself then, I'm sure there's a lot there's a lot going through my mind, like, okay, there's a lot to be considered there for the next couple of years. But moving on to yourself as a business owner, again, we like to ask each individual about their experiences. And one of the questions is, what would you say your biggest lesson is, if you can pick one, throughout your business owner entrepreneurial journey that you've had to date? Maybe two, if there's obviously going to be more that stand
out. Resilience, I would suggest, the singular focus of what you're trying to do and why. Mm-hmm. Obviously, starting up a business and building a business, you're faced with many hurdles that come across your path. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times you can be taken off course, and hence you have to have an extremely strong singular vision of what you're trying to do. I think that singular view that I have has strengthened quite dramatically over the years, especially as the business is have grown. It's a number of businesses that I run, and they have grown quite strongly. So that's one. Obviously, education of the team itself. So I spend a great deal of time educating the team, because they not only do they need to understand what we do as a business and why we do it as a business, but also as a background of the whole industry itself. So education of your employees is vitally important. So they understand. So we run a nicely connected team, and I do foster internal research and internal education a great deal.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. Some good lessons shared there. So if we were to go back in time and meet David at 18, what would be the best piece of advice you could offer him at 18 before going into your adult journey of life? Question.
Yes,
hindsight.
A good question. Hindsight's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
We all obviously make many errors through our adult life, but I think mistakes make you stronger. I was always somewhat of an extrovert and someone that works very hard. If I was to give advice to a younger person, I would say to them that you are always on a learning curve, and take every experience and turn it to a positive. You know, there's obviously many occasions as you grow up, you become, you know, an adult and move across into 30s and 40s and 50s, that you can be brought down on a number of different occasions. But I tend to use that as inspiration to move forward. So you have to turn every negative into a positive. That would be particularly my focus, I think.
Like it. It's positive spin on the experiences that you have in life. Thank you for that. And you mentioned inspiration there, so that leads nicely on to the next question about what is it that you use for inspiration to do what you do. It could be the people that you work with, it could be friends, family, anything that you read you might want to mention or listen to, anything like that. But yeah, the inspiration that you use to do what you do.
I think for the last 30 years of my career, I've been singly focused about economics and the macro. I do believe that we are going through a much larger event that really surpasses anything we've experienced before, as our age group is concerned. It really is one of the events that tend to appear every 100 or so years. And hence I've been extremely focused about the macro, forecasting the developments within that macro, and hence where you see the trends developing across multiple different research ideas, from technical analysis to cycle analysis to macro to fundamentals. We embrace them all. That, to be honest with you, has inspired me. And I have to say, my wife inspired me on a regular basis. So she keeps me going.
Yeah.
But to be honest with you, the deterioration of the macro picture does inspire me, I'm afraid. That's what pushes my buttons.
Yeah, that's good. I say everyone has their different things that they get motivated, inspired by, and the work that you do is fundamental to that inspiration, obviously. So that's good. Thank you very much for sharing that. So lastly, in terms of any latest news around what you do and your business, even if it's a case of directing us towards your website to find out a bit more about what it is that you do, feel free to share that, take the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned earlier on that what is the difference, or what is the focus of somebody that's building a business from scratch? And your focus should be on what is the change in the market? Where is the market gap? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to achieve that others you don't believe are achieving? Obviously, we're walking through a major economic event that many of our clients and many clients or many individuals I speak to are very confused about what's coming up. So hence a focus on how to achieve what what we're trying to do. For example, precious metals. People generally don't understand precious metals. They don't understand the benefits thereof. They tend to believe that a diversification is required every so often into the precious metal field. What do they buy? Do they buy gold? Do they buy silver? And then, what's the cycle turn? How long do I hold that position? Do I buy an ETF? Do I buy physical? What are the benefits of holding physical? There's a multitude of questions. And I noticed across the marketplace that there was a great, huge gaping gap in any particular bullion house, including banks, that don't offer that real advice, and also don't apply modern portfolio theory to the precious metal space in the first place. So we don't just sell precious metals and put it in a vault and hopefully the price grows and the metals collect dust in the vault. That's not something that we're interested in. We're more interested in what drives precious metals in the first place, and invariably their industrial supply demand picture. And then obviously gold in particular is a crisis hedge, not an inflation hedge. But the underlying supply and demand that drives each individual metal, they each move in their own mini cycles, and you get significant pricing anomalies between each metal. What we do is we rebalance our clients' portfolios to take account for that. We started actively offering these algorithmic models that we built out that we feed with an enormous amount of information. We work off 55 variables, and it tells you what a precious metal portfolio should look like in the first place. We have achieved outsized returns. We are physically audited on a yearly basis. We've achieved somewhere around 765% net return since the beginning of 2016. And if you'd invested just in gold or silver, you'd be up around about 70, 80%. So we've considerably out-achieved or produced a significant alpha return over holding just physical gold or silver. So we concentrate on a number of different precious metals, and we're simply just rebalancing it. We don't apply any leverage, collateralization, paper trading. It's just purely physical. The benefit to the UK client base and a number of different geographical regions of the world is that the clients can hold the physical metals in their own segregated vault without any zero third-party liability, but also tax-free. You can't buy precious metals in the UK tax-free. I mean, tax-free for gold, but everything else is taxable. And then an understanding of how capital gains tax works in the UK when it comes to precious metals. So we alleviate all of that, zero tax. Clients have their metals vaulted in bonded vaults, which are effectively tax-free zones until such time they pull the metals out and convert it back to fiat currency. So we can do a number of different rebalances throughout the year for the clients' portfolios in physical to achieve the outsized returns that we're looking at. That's what we do.
So where can we go to find out if we wanted to make an inquiry and start the process of engaging with you?
Yeah, if you can go visit www.auctus, metals.com. Auctus being a Latin word to make grow, and that's effectively what we do. We have a number of clients that already hold physical gold holdings or silver holdings, and they come to us to manage their metals to produce significant outsized returns over and above what they would have achieved just with a static holding. Or clients send us funds, and then we give them their portfolio breakdowns, and they've got their own vault, like I say, insured by Lloyd's of London, tax-free, independently audited. That's what we do.
Fantastic. We'll check it out. Thanks, David. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I hope things go from strength to strength for you. And we look forward to keeping an eye out on what happens. All the best for
it. Thanks for the chat. I appreciate it.
Take care. Cheers.